To stay warm and dry across the Great Lakes, that snow continues to pile up across the UP of Michigan. More on that in just a moment, but first of all, we need to get a tropical update. And what's going on out there in the Atlantic? Well, not very much, fortunately. We do have our tropical depression, Leslie, which is taking on extratropical characteristics and is no longer a threat to really anybody. It looks like Leslie is going to be missing Bermuda, too, located about 310 miles to the northwest of Bermuda. And we also have a flare-up here, watching waves moving off the coast of Africa. But this time of year, we tend to not see too much in the way of development as far as making it all the way across the Atlantic to threaten the Caribbean or the U.S. mainland. But still, we continue to watch waves moving across. This one right here, located about several hundred miles actually to the southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, is entering an area that is not very favorable for development. The upper level winds are really just not very favorable. But here's Tropical Depression Leslie, the final advisory as of 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Winds are now 35 miles per hour, racing to the northeast at 23 miles per hour. Again, this needs to be updated. The system continues to miss Bermuda, so that's certainly good news as Leslie continues to move away. We are seeing a few areas of convection right here across the Windward and Leeward Islands, but no tropical development expected with this, at least not in the near future. And we continue to watch remnants of what was once Hurricane Keith and Tropical Storm Keith, bringing rains to Mexico, North Mexico, and now we're starting to see that moisture moving up into South Texas. So watch out in Brownsville and Corpus Christi for some showers and thunderstorms, some of which could be on the heavy side and could cause some localized flooding. Otherwise, the Gulf of Mexico looks fairly quiet. Florida looks beautiful right now, but watch out later today, especially along the Keys. We could have some showers and storms and enough instability that we could see more waterspout activity. And we do have a few areas of flare-up here in the Gulf waters. Overnight last night, some areas of convection, but that really seems to have petered out during the early morning hours. And also there you see the heavier convection moving across Mexico. We also have Tropical Storm Olivia in the eastern Pacific. Winds now 60 miles per hour, so Olivia has strengthened since our last advisory came out. Moving to the west-northwest at 8 miles per hour. The center of the storm is located 805 miles to the west-southwest of Acapulco, and the pressure has been dropping a little bit. But the good news with Olivia, it's moving away from Mexico and therefore also moving away from the United States. There's the convection associated with Olivia. Looks fairly impressive on the satellite. We'll continue to monitor that.
The wind, so that probably will not have a chance to develop. Here's the final advisory on Leslie, tropical depression, 500 miles south of Cape Sable, Nova Scotia. That's about 310 miles off to the west-northwest of Bermuda, moving northeast 23 and away from Bermuda. And as we take a look at Bermuda, I've been checking the weather out. Winds coming up out of the south, pretty brisk winds all morning at about 20 miles an hour, gusting to 25 at times. Scattered clouds, a thick cloud cover to the west, and there's what's left of the depression pulling up to the north with this blob here. So Bermuda just getting a brush by, probably a few showers, maybe a squall this afternoon. Farther towards the south, we don't see anything really approaching the islands here. Farther out in the Atlantic, that's where we see that area of low pressure I was telling you about. Looks like it's trying to become a depression, but strong westerly winds downstream, so that might inhibit development. So we get you in a little bit closer, and here's Tropical Storm Olivia. And Olivia is a tenacious system. Top winds now 60 miles an hour, getting a little better organized here. And it is forecast to move towards some cooler waters, gradually diminish. And then the question is, what happens with the moisture? Probably get pulled up from the southwest during the upcoming week. For today, a few showers and storms.
Line tells us October can still be a very busy month. Steve?
Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. I'm Christina Abernathy. We'll take a look at some wet weather and some wintry weather across the country coming up in just a moment. But first, it's time for our tropical update with Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Christina. If you're wondering if the tropical season's over, I wouldn't bet against it, because on average, about 88% of the time, we have a tropical cyclone on or after this date. So we definitely are not done with the season yet. The interesting thing, of course, is they tend to cluster in the western Caribbean, at least in the formation areas this time of year. So that's the area we look at typically. Now, we look at the large-scale picture here. We see that's a neutral area for development, but we think that that may become more favorable over the next few days, so we're going to monitor that area very carefully. Also, an area out in the central Atlantic there associated with a tropical wave under neutral conditions, primarily because the low-level wind field is favorable, not the upper-level wind field. Now, let's look over there in the western Caribbean where we expect things to happen this time of year, and I have a couple of features I put on here. We've had this front come down out of the north, and it's basically sitting right along this area right in through here And this is the area where we have a maximum spin right up in here. Now the spin continues down in here to this low pressure area. The spin is basically a counterclockwise spin where we would expect some potential for tropical cyclone development. So up in here, this spin is related to very fast winds behind the front over the Florida Straits and back over the Bahamas. So this area is a prime area for potential development over the next several days. So we're going to watch that carefully. Right now, we see a cluster of showers way down here to the south, showing no signs of development tonight. Now, as we go to the Gulf of Mexico, we've seen basically a mid-latitude feature there. The front's gone through and a bunch of clouds in here. Those clouds are mixing that cold air up with the warm water, and that cold air is only about 6 degrees colder than the water is now, and in another few days it'll be back to normal, and tropical development will be possible there, but not tonight. It's too cold. Out in the central Atlantic, here are the islands right here. There are a couple of features here. This batch of showers is going to come into the central and southern islands starting tonight and linger about 12 to 18 hours. Expect some isolated and scattered showers through the islands tomorrow. And we have a tropical wave out in here with a potential low pressure area roughly in here. We're going to watch this for potential development. The upper winds are unfavorable. We have basically some fast upper level westerly winds in here. That's a mistake right there. And those are keeping this in check. But nevertheless, that will come and bring some gusty winds to the island if it doesn't develop in about 2.5 to 3 days. Out in the eastern Pacific, we've been monitoring our tropical depression Olivia. It's been captured and killed by the stratocumulus clouds, a very stable air mass, and nothing else going on there. So let's get back to the studio with Christina.
All right, thanks a lot.
This edition of Storm Watch is sponsored by Kohler. Looking at the current picture, we have very quiet weather for the eastern two-thirds of the country. It was a little chilly this morning, but it's warming up quite nicely. Out west, we have the unsettled weather with rain and snow, depending on your location and or elevation. We'll take a complete look at the forecast coming up in just a moment. Right now, though, let's shift gears and see what's going on in the tropics. It is still hurricane season, and with all the details, let's go to our tropical weather expert, Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Vivian, and we continue to monitor a couple features out there. This time of year, we tend to find the development off into the western Caribbean. Let's look at the large-scale picture here, and I'll show you a couple of features we're looking at. One of those was a weak low-pressure area in the western Caribbean, right in a neutral development area. That's this area right here. Another one was a low-pressure area out here in the tropical Atlantic. And then the larger area of all this cloudiness and rain coming into the islands here. By the way, there's 30-foot seas heading toward France. For those of you who are going to the French Riviera, watch out for the high surf there. Let's start out here in the Caribbean, and this little cluster of clouds in here associated with a low pressure, it looks like that low has come on shore. That's going to swing into the eastern Pacific or go over land and dissipate. So we're no longer too concerned about that area right now for development, although we will be watching the potential for a low pressure area developing up in this area over the next couple of days. Now, what do we have farther out as we go out into the Atlantic? First of all, that batch of showers we saw developing yesterday is now over the islands, basically Martinique southward. Heaviest rainfall basically in the vicinity of Grenada tonight, last tonight, and come into tomorrow. But this other area out here is a broad low pressure area, and the only reason it's not developing is because we have upper level southwesterly flow over the top of it that's fairly brisk. You can see it on a larger scale picture here. Low pressure area roughly in here. These upper level southwesterlies are very, very strong, so we don't expect development. But look at all of this rain here. That's going to be moving in the general direction of the islands over the next several days, so you're going to see a little wetter period than you have in the last several weeks. As we go to the Gulf of Mexico today, we see virtually nothing. The cold air is slowly modifying. You have a weak little gyre of low pressure right on the coast here, but all these clouds are low. There are not any thunderstorms there at all. So we're free and clear in the Gulf of Mexico and off the east coast as well. Eastern Pacific, we're in great shape as well. Remnants of our tropical storm Olivia are sliding up a frontal boundary and producing quite a bit of rain over southern Arizona and New Mexico. And we'll continue to monitor that. Let's get back to Vivian in the studio now.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Lyons. A quick